Okay. Hello,
Oh, we're
everyone.
on now.
Hey, everyone. Welcome to the Crocast Podcast. I'm your host, Nate, along with my co-host, Matt.
Hey, nice to meet you.
And today I'm joined by my good friend, the Texas naturalist himself, Andrew Austin. Andrew, welcome to the show.
Yeah, good to be here, man. A little nervous, but your first podcast is you're bound to be a little nervous, so see how it goes.
Yeah. All right, so Andrew, first tell us a little bit about yourself, like what you do, how you got into herps, a little bit of your adventures in nature background.
I'm a pretty now I'm a pretty well-rounded naturalist, but I did start with herps. Been field herping for, I don't know, 15 years. I'm 25. Started pretty early. I remember the first snake I ever caught. It was a rough green snake up in North Texas. I know you guys have talked about Steve Irwin. You know, he was definitely a big part of my interest in wildlife, herps in particular, and crocodilians especially. But I don't give my dad enough credit. My dad, he was taking me out hunting, fishing at a very young age, and that definitely played a big part. So yeah, you know, I've been just going through life, you know, pursuing the dream of adventure and, you know, learning all about herps and natural history and, you know, trying to make a living out of it.
So what do you currently do for work?
So I just graduated with my undergraduate degree in wildlife and fisheries sciences from Texas A&M. I graduated this recent summer, and I got hired on at an environmental consulting firm, a company that basically does a lot of Clean Water Act permitting, Endangered Species Act permitting. That's about half the company is like regulatory, and the other half is more restoration. So they do a lot of stream restoration, which is what I was doing last week up in Oklahoma, was more stream restoration. So that's what I'm up to right now. I used to work at a place called Crocodile Encounter, and I still do a little bit for them, which is always nice. Got to keep crocs in the mix, you know.
Yeah.
Yeah. So it seems like I have it figured out. We'll see how long I last. But
what is a job like that, like environmental consulting? What does that all entail? Because I know, like, when I was getting my undergrad and everything, that's a lot of jobs that you see, like when you're looking for jobs and stuff, is environmental consulting. So if like people looking for jobs, what does that entail? Like maybe it's to see if they're interested in that.
So there is a stigma around consulting, like, you know, it's kind of like low hanging fruit, you know, like if you can't get a job with an agency like U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service or like your local or your state wildlife agency, it's kind of like the next option is to go work for an environmental consulting firm. And a lot of them are tied to like these big engineering firms, and they just have like an environmental department, and they'll hire you on to basically help them through, like when they're starting a big project, they're going to develop on land. You do all the environmental permits. So that requires going out in the field, you know, collecting data on the resources. If there's wetlands there, you got to get a permit through the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers, and then you go through that whole process. The company I work for, it's called Ecosystem Planning and Restoration. So it is all environmental, and we, like I said, about half the company is, you know, really kind of helping these, you know, like TxDOT is our main client. TxDOT is our Department of Transportation here in Texas. Anytime they're going to do any kind of work in a stream, like building a new bridge or expanding a roadway that has wetlands nearby, they hire us to get them through that regulatory process. We go out there and we survey for wetlands, which is what I do. So I'm like a field ecologist. They send me out in the field. I collect data. It does require some understanding of wetland ecology, but you have to know a lot about plants and soils. But for me, that's fine. You know, I've always loved wetlands. Part of the reason I always loved crocodilians is because I love wetland ecosystems, and crocodilians play such a large role in those systems. So it is related to my passion for crocs, which is good. So yeah, that's about it. Not every consulting job is going to be as ideal as the one I have, because like half the company, we do a lot of restoration. A lot of these firms, you end up just doing regulatory stuff, and that would get old. I really prefer to do the restoration because I actually feel like I'm making a difference in the world.
What makes you like wetlands?
Wetlands. Well, I grew up. Most of my life I've spent in Southeast Texas, which is where we have a lot of alligators native. And, I guess, my passion for crocs plays a big part of that. Herps in general, my first experience is herping. I would go to the local ditch and find water snakes. Where I grew up, we have 4 species in the rodeo. So, it's a lot of fun to go, and it's really easy herping to go find water snakes in a ditch. So I've always kind of gravitated toward, and I like fishing a lot. So that's another one. And wetlands are just, they're very dynamic systems, and they provide very important ecosystem services that benefit humans, like recreation, clean water, and all, wildlife habitat. So I've always sort of gravitated towards wetland ecosystems.
So you mentioned you did work at Crocodile Encounter, and that you're looking at crocodilians. Are there any other crocodilian jobs or internships that you have done in the past?
Yeah, I've been very fortunate. So the very first job I had was at a place called Gator Country, which a little bit about that place, Nate. Yeah, you spent some time there as well. I was very lucky. The town I grew up in was a town called Finette, Texas, and that is where Gator Country is located. So I was able to volunteer there throughout high school, and meet people like Sean Heflake was one of the bigger names I met in the crocodilian world that I met when I was a kid or teenager, and I got some exposure, hanging around professionals there. And one really cool thing there, aside from getting hands-on experience and doing a lot of like nuisance alligator stuff, is Gator Country had this intern program where they have these college students come in and they stay, a couple months. And I was able to hang out with these people when I was, a teenager, and they kind of told me about like what I need to study in college to work in natural resources. And because I was never a good student, so these people kind of provided, mentorship for me. So I did have a lot of value there. And then I went straight to Crocodile Encounter after that, and worked there for 3 or 4 years, and I'm still like alumni there, basically. It's a really tight knit group, and I'm lucky that I get to hang around still, even though I don't work there anymore. And then the pinnacle is the CRC, getting to go to Belize to work with the Crocodile Research Coalition. That was probably the coolest thing I've done.
Did working for Gator Country as a teenager, is that what started your passion into gators, or did you like them before then?
Funny story. I was catching alligators long before I went there illegally. I was a kid, so I know the alligator program leader for Texas now. So if he sees this, it's no big deal. He's not going to get me in trouble. So yeah, so I lived in this town, Finette, and I was kind of known as the reptile guy, and all of the locals around there weren't as inviting to someone from Louisiana coming over and starting an alligator facility, and that was Gary Sarge. So he's the owner of Gator Country, and so he, a lot of locals there, weren't, huge fans of his. So like when I moved down to Finette, I moved to Finette when I was like in 5th or 6th grade, and a lot of my friends were like, "No, don't go to Gator Country." So I kind of just did the alligator thing on my own, again illegally. Not promoting catching alligators because it's very dangerous. Anyway, so I had experience going in there, which is kind of funny. But so yeah, I had interest long before going there. I just eventually. So I guess Steve Irwin, that's the simple answer. Uh, I'll never forget. I remember, so like early on in my childhood, I lived in North Texas where we really didn't have alligators. It turns out now I've learned that there is a small population along the Trinity River, but I didn't know that when I was a kid. So I would literally like take the water hose at my house and like fill up like make puddles in the yard and pretend there were crocodilians in there, like I was Steve Irwin, like going through a swamp because I didn't have alligators. That's I was really young doing stuff like that.
And you didn't gravitate towards any other like reptiles, like snakes or lizards or anything like that?
Oh yeah. Snakes definitely are probably still my main passion. Well, it's a tough competition between snakes and crocs. I have different interests in crocs. Like crocs are these apex predators. They're like keystone species. Like conserving crocs conserves entire aquatic systems, but like I like snakes for the diversity. Snakes are much more diverse as a whole, obviously, which is unfortunate. It'd be cool if there were hundreds of crocodilians, like there were in the past. But
Yeah.
that's probably So I'm interested in all herps. But yeah, so the crocs are they're just a big apex predator and just an evolutionarily interesting group that are worth learning about and that sort of thing.
So, do you have any interesting experience and stories from your time down with the CRC?
Yeah, so I've been twice now. I really lucked out the first time I went, and this was back. I was like their first intern. They when I first hit them up on Facebook, they were really inviting, but they kind of seemed like they not unorganized, but they like didn't have a program for interns. So they kind of were just like winging it, but it was awesome because for one, it was really cheap when I went. They didn't now they have a more legit program where it costs a little more. It's a little more organized. So when I went, it was kind of I just kind of went down there, but my time there aligned when they were doing a nationwide survey for the Moralettes crocodile, which much of that was spent in the Chickabel rainforest, and they were surveying the McCall River and its tributaries. And so we're, the really remote area, we drove maybe 3 or 4 hours through, oddly enough, Pineland. It looks like East Texas. And then we get to the McCall River and you go up it. And then on the other side of the river, it's tropical broadleaf forest with, howler monkeys and scarlet macaws and jaguar. Interesting story. Before we actually went into the forest, we went to the Belize Zoo and they had rescued a jaguar cub at the camp where we were going to be camping at in the Chickabel forest. And so we got to see this little cub up close and like we couldn't pet it, and it came from the very spot that we camped for a week straight doing croc surveys, which was kind of neat. But yeah, we'd go out there and we were doing night eye shine surveys, going out and counting crocs, and surveying it. It's very systematic, going out and surveying sections of river. So we'd do a section of river one night, just eye shine, and the next night we'd go out and actually catch the crocs, which was, that's where the fun is.
Yeah.
But working with Marissa, she's a really good mentor of mine. I know you had her on here, I guess 2 weeks ago, recently. So she was teaching me all about the science and stuff, and that was really my first exposure to field research. And that was that trip going into the Chickabel forest really inspired me to stick with school and finish my bachelor's, because that was my first real exposure to more actual science. But working with Marissa, she's very, very serious about not stressing the animals out. We're there to collect data and to ensure the animals are taken care of, and because it's a very stressful process going out catching these big crocs and pulling them into the boat and collecting morphometric data and all that. So it was overall a really cool learning experience working with Marissa. And I've been lucky enough to go back down there, and she's welcomed me back after, since then. So really a cool connection for me.
So you mentioned work with morphological data. So that we do with work with studying the hybridization between Morlays and American crocodiles.
Yes, see, I don't. That she has been looking at that, for several years, and I did get to catch one. This wasn't in Chickabole. This was so after Chickabole, I went down to where she lives in Placencia, and where the CRC is based out of, and we went to the shrimp farm where the two species live sympatrically, and you see pure acutus, and you see pure morlets, but we caught one that was, obviously a hybrid. And there are several criteria that she goes by, like a checklist, at looking at different morphometric traits and to really understand if it is a hybrid or not. So it's not so subjective. But my subjective just experience was, wow, that's definitely a hybrid. That thing is weird.
How so was it weird looking?
I mean, it just had the perfect intermediate look between the two. It had traits like the scutes, like the dorsal scutes were very acutus, but the coloration was more or less. But the head was kind of a perfect intermediate between both. It was really a strange croc. I didn't know what to make of it, and it was about a 6-foot animal too. So it had time to develop those traits. Because when they're young, it's kind of hard to tell. At least for me, she pointed out several. My last time I went, we were kind of in the same area, and we caught some juveniles, and she considered them hybrids, but I don't spend enough time to tell. Have to look. It gets pretty detailed with the juveniles and the hatchlings, but the big adults are obvious.
So do you still do a lot of field herping now, just either on your own or with,
Yeah,
whatever?
yeah. I try to get out every weekend. These days, I'm kind of embarrassed to say, if it's early in the year, I'm mainly going after snakes and herps, but I do spend a considerable amount, not to get off on plants, but I do spend a considerable amount of time looking for rare plants, which is kind of just I've just been evolving more into a general naturalist. But one thing I will say is if you you like the natural world and you like, looking for rare species of herps, like any rare organism will be enjoyable to look for. That's kind of what I've noticed about myself. I really enjoy looking for rare orchids and stuff in my free time as well, but definitely herps take up most of my time.
That's how I've actually found, like in school or whatnot. Like I hated botany at first, and then when I took a botany course, I found it to be like super interesting. And
Yep.
I always found insects to be neat, but not really that interesting until I took like an entomology course, and then I thought it was like just one of the coolest things in the world and stuff. So definitely, the more you study things, like if you like, just if you're a naturalist type of person, the more you study into things, the more interesting they find. What is you're in South Texas? Southeast Texas?
I'm in Houston, North Houston.
Okay. What's the herping like over there? Like what kind of herps do you have? Just kind of what was it like?
We got some neat stuff here. Like if you come to Houston, you want to see a buttermilk racer. That's one of the big ones you want to see. It's a subspecies of the North American racer, Culeber constrictor anthicus. They're like blue but with like white spots all over them, and they're only found in scattered populations in East Texas, and the best place to see them is in North Houston. So one cool thing about this area is, if you go like a few hours west of here, you start to get into more typically Western species of plants and animals. So one cool thing about Texas in general is it's, for one, it's big, but it's positioned where the eastern deciduous forest kind of grades into the western deserts. So we have really cool herp diversity. But Houston specifically, again, the buttermilk racer, timber rattlesnakes, which are declining because urban expansion is continuing. Pygmy rattlesnakes, although the The one species I haven't seen here is the pygmy rattlesnake, and it's a really tough one, even when they're common, the western pygmy. But here they're kind of declining, so increasingly hard to find. We have western diamondbacks. There's a county south of here where you can see a western diamondback and a timber rattlesnake in the same habitat, which is kind of cool. I like stuff like that. Western mud snakes, Louisiana milk snakes are another big one you'd want to see if you're around here. There are roads in the coastal prairies. I don't know if some people are familiar with Anahuac National Wildlife Refuge, but that area, you can cruise down one road and see 12 species of snakes in an hour, which is pretty solid diversity.
Now you guys have the Trans-Pecos copperhead, but I think that's like by like the Oklahoma border, correct?
So the Trans-Pecos copperhead was now not even a recognized subspecies, but it was found. Yeah, I still like to think of if you're west of the Pecos River, in what is known as the Trans-Pecos ecoregion, those copperheads I still like to call Trans-Pecos copperheads. These copperheads are living out and the Davis Mountains and the Chisis Mountains, out proper desert environments. They still stick to the creeks and the riparian areas, but they look way different than broad-banded copperhead or a southern copperhead. Those start. You got to get past Austin a few hours to get to the Trans-Pecos copperhead range.
Does the southern copperhead make its way to South Texas, like Houston area?
Yeah. So their range follows the piney woods, which is kind of just the very western extent of the eastern forest that spans all of the eastern U.S. So once you get out of the piney woods, you get like west of Houston, it goes through like some coastal prairie and then into some oak savannas. You get to the broad-banded copperhead range, which they're pretty nice looking snakes. Some of them almost look as nice as a Trans-Pecos copperhead. But now they're all if you're west of like the Brazos River, they're just calling all that broad-banded.
Yeah.
And everything east of it's the eastern copperhead, but it'll change. Taxonomy's very fluid.
Yeah.
I just like I'm nostalgic about my original taxonomy that I learned when I was a kid. So
yeah, when I worked for the Kentucky Reptile Zoo, apparently a paper came out splitting the forest cobra into 7 different subspecies. Just
oh wow,
paper. Yeah, and that's insanity.
Yeah, I mean I'm not a taxonomy junkie. I do like to keep up and I like to understand relationships between organisms and stuff. But yeah, I don't obsess over the taxonomic revisions. Some of them are interesting and very necessary, and can be good for conservation. But yeah, I don't keep up with all of it.
Yeah, it's kind of impossible to keep up with all the taxonomic changes as it is.
Yeah, well, you think herps are bad, plants are even worse. I mean, I don't know what the hell is going on with plants.
Does genetics, so like I know as far as herps, genetics plays the majority of the role is a lot of the taxonomy change, at least recently.
Yeah, it was morphology before. Yeah.
Is it the same with plants?
Honestly, I would think so. Morphology probably plays. I don't follow the botany literature really at all. My interest in botany is really just looking for rare plants because my interest in plants is really just I'm really interested in like the ecosystems before Europeans came here to the U.S. So like any organisms that represent like those pre-European ecosystems, I'm interested in. But yeah, I haven't really gotten super into botany and all the taxonomy with it.
What makes you interested in the pre-Columbian ecosystems?
Man, I think I just have a longing for just the past, I guess.
Or human?
Yeah, I just wish I could travel back in time to even just 300 years ago, and see the Houston area. And I'll go on Google Earth and there's pretty good aerial imagery from like the 1940s, and even in the short time span between now and then, the landscape has changed so much. And I'm looking at these aerials and I'm like, man, I can only imagine all the herps that were there. Like we had smooth green snakes native to this area. The last record was maybe 20 years ago, but they're, assumed to be long gone by now because all the development of the prairies. When I look at that 1944 imagery, I'm like, man, I'm probably looking at prairie that once supported, these rare little smooth green snakes. I don't know. I've always been fascinated by, the original ecosystems that were unaltered. And there are plenty of areas, and even in North America where you can still see prairies in their original state, that haven't been touched in thousands of years. It's all the ecological and evolutionary processes are still at play and can be appreciated, but they're increasingly rare, and same with old growth forests.
So there's one in particular type of prairie ecosystem you introduced me to down there and along the Gulf Coast of Texas that it really is a weird, unique ecosystem. You mind telling us a little bit more about that?
Where do we go? It's been a while. Got to refresh. We went to the Columbia Bottomlands. I know that.
Yeah, so those oak mounds, is that what we call them?
Oh, Mima mounds. Mima mounds. Is that what you're talking about?
Yeah.
I told you about the Mima. Yeah, so Mima mounds are just these micro topographical features, little mounds that they don't even know the origin of them, although I think they're probably associated with so like 10,000 years ago, the sea level rose, and a lot of the Southeast Texas landscape was marshland, and when the water receded, what I think those mounds are remnants of old upland islands within that marsh. Who knows? But the only reason I pay attention to Mima mounds is because if you see them, that land has never been plowed, and if the land has never been plowed, it's likely that you can see rare plants and animals, especially herps, because a lot of herps, once that are reliant on prairies, once you plow the land, they just, they disappear from the landscape. So I mainly pay attention to Mima mounds for that reason, to hopefully locate, rare and declining herp species. I like to say smooth green snakes or crawfish frogs, stuff like that. You'll find associated with old growth, unplowed prairies, and Mima mounds are that indicator for that type of system.
So since you're big into like the untouched kind of past like ecosystems, did dinosaurs at all like play a role in your getting into herps and stuff? Like, were you into dinosaurs at all as a kid, or?
And I was, but I never got super into them. In fact, I wish I knew more about dinosaurs. I really hate that I don't know enough about them. If you try to test me on extinct crocs, I would fail the test, and I really hate that, because understanding the early crocodilians can help you really appreciate the ones we have now. So dinosaurs and old extinct vertebrate taxa in general are worth learning about.
Yeah, I didn't read the article, but I saw the article. It's the headline just said that first identified winged creature was some sort of reptile that was huge or something like that, according to the article headline. I thought that was pretty interesting, but I didn't read it. So yeah,
they find a lot of cool stuff, and these paleontologists, they really help us understand a lot about extant fauna that we have now. Same thing with plants. It seems like a lot of what we understand about plant families now, plant groups now, is a lot of it's based off of extinct plant fossils that they find. So that stuff it's really interesting, but it's hard to when these scientists are trying to piece together what the ecology was like millions of years ago. It's surely a lot of it's based off of just hypothesizing. You never truly know what the landscape was like back then, but it's fun to think about, though. And there is plenty of evidence to find in the fossil record but I'm not going to get into that because I don't know enough about that. I'm starting to get away from my comfort zone. I'm more comfortable with the here and now, you know.
Yeah.
So you mentioned you went up to Oklahoma. Are there like any other places you've gone herping lately outside of your normal
Yeah.
haunt?
Yeah. So this job, one cool thing about consulting is I've been able to travel around. So yeah, I was up there for work up in Oklahoma. I was actually working in Cushing, which is like the pipeline capital of the U.S. It's like every major pipeline comes through there. We're restoring a stream system for one of those companies, which is kind of an interesting project. So after that, I went to the Ouachita Mountains on my way back and saw some really cool salamanders, some plethodontid salamanders, which are several of which were only found in the Ouachita Mountains. Pretty neat. Let's see here. I made 2 trips to Big Bend, the Big Bend region this year. First trip, I only saw 1 snake. It's kind of ashamed of that. Usually when I go to West Texas, I spend most of my time herping, and kind of the thing to do out there is shine cuts all night and look for gray-banded king snakes and Trans-Pecos copperheads and rock rattlesnakes and many other really cool species. But these recent trips I've taken out there, or the first one, I really wanted to just like experience the Big Bend National Park area. So I always had this pressure to find herps, but I suppressed that pressure and I just enjoyed the scenery. And I just stumbled across a Baird's rat snake up in the Chisos Mountains. Then my second trip was pretty recent. I went out there to help film for a really cool documentary coming out. It's called Deep in the Heart. It's produced by Fin and Fur Productions. A guy named Ben Masters is the mastermind behind it. No pun intended. Really cool dude, passionate conservationist and cinematographer. That's gonna be a cool. Even if you're not from Texas, it's gonna be something to look out for. It might end up being on Netflix or something. It's a really big production that's really covering like all the major ecosystems in Texas. And for me, it was really flattering to get invited out to help catch some wildlife and help them wrangle up critters to film, because they didn't have a lot of herp footage, and I kind of stumbled upon them on Instagram and got invited out, and I've helped them twice now. They came out to East Texas earlier this year and to film in the Big Thicket, and then they invited me out again to help them film in the Big Bend region. So I did find some herps then. I found some diamondback rattlesnakes. They're pretty common, pretty easy to find. What else did I get? Got a snoring gopher snake, black-tailed rattlesnake, which is pretty cool. Always enjoy it. Blacktails are really common out there. They're such a cool snake. And so it's nice when you go out to like the Davis Mountains, you're probably going to see one if you ever make it out there. So it's a quality common snake. So yeah, it's probably the coolest trip I've taken this year was that trip out to Big Bend, helping them film. It's really neat. One of the cooler herp trips I've taken recently.
What's your favorite snake to find?
My favorite snake?
Yeah.
Oh man, you can't ask herpers that, man. You don't like that question, Matt, and neither do you, Nate. Y'all know how that goes. Man, I guess timbers. I love timber rattlesnake. For a native snake in the Houston area, I would say a pygmy rattlesnake, but I've never even found one, and I'm really ashamed about that.
Well, that kind of leads me to the next question. So that may be the answer. Is there like a snake or a reptile in general that's like on your list that you really want to find that you haven't?
That's my white whale. Yeah, I've lived in their range my entire life, and I have friends that don't live around here that will come and find one like their first try. And have you ever heard of a drift fence trap survey?
Yeah, with the buckets.
Yeah, buckets or like box traps.
Yeah.
So like I ran one of those last summer. Actually, right down the road from Gator Country, there's a population of pygmies And I got access to a property out there, and I ran a drift fence all summer. Didn't catch a single snake. I guess I'm a terrible herpetologist, I guess, because not only did I not get a pygmy, I didn't catch a single snake. So it was a hard work. That was my first time, building a drift fence. I already had the box trap. I made this box trap when I was in high school, like 8 years ago, with 2 catch pygmy rattlesnakes, and it survived multiple hurricanes in my Nana's garage. Still intact. So last year I went and dug it out of my Nana's garage and went out and installed it. The hardest part is digging the trenches for the actual drift fences. That was like bust ass work in the Southeast Texas heat, and it was all for nothing. But I put max effort into finding a pygmy. It's just, man, they occur in low densities. They're small. They're camouflage. Their preferred habitat is like these thick palmetto flatwoods, and they're tough. I'll find one someday.
Yeah, maybe next time I come down there, I could go with you, see if we get some of that beginner's luck.
Yeah, we need to mix in some beginner's luck. That'll probably be what gets it for me.
And you still need a timber, by the way.
Yeah, timber too. We can get you a timber. Last time you came, it was just wasn't the right time of year. We'll go with that.
When I live in South Florida here now, but I did live up in Georgia, and one thing that I've always wanted to catch was a timber. Didn't catch a timber, and then I went and interned in Kentucky. I was like, okay, this is like perfect opportunity to actually see like a wild timber and everything. And all sorts of people sitting there saying they've seen one. I was out herping all the time looking for one. I had a guest even come in. Like, oh yeah, we just saw one just down the road just a few minutes ago and stuff. I never saw one the entire time. Still have not seen a wild timber rattlesnake.
Haven't seen one.
No. So that's. But my white whale here in South Florida though is a male red-headed agama. I've caught a female.
Agama.
Yeah, I would like to get a male because they're super cool looking, And
yeah.
And I've noticed there's always like a lot of females to like 2 males. And so when you find a population, there'll be a bunch of them, but there'll only be actually like 2 males, and they're they're lizards, they're skittish, so they're really hard to find. But that's my white whale right now, is I'm trying to grab one of those.
Yeah.
I only have a lot to complain about because you found eastern indigos growing up, and all I found was northern water snakes. So
yeah, Nate, you definitely got the short end of the stick for geography here.
Hey, I got cool salamanders though.
You got salamanders. Hey, I need to come out for the salamanders. My recent trip to the Ouachita has made me realize I'm missing out on salamanders.
We got some not triploid, tetraploid unisex complexes up around where I live.
Oh, that's that ambystoma.
Assemblies.
Yeah.
Ambystomas.
Yeah.
Yes, I believe there's a hybrid of Jeffersonianum and Laterale.
Yeah. That's neat. Yeah. The plethodon out east are insane to me. The plethodon diversity, like in the Appalachians. Am I saying that right? Appalachian? I'm never feeling Appalachian. I don't know. I'm a dumb Texan. My grandmother knows of like one creek right next to her house where there's like this one endangered salamander, and I'm so embarrassed that I can never remember its name, and I've never gone out to see it, but it's like on a neighbor's property and never been able to get permission to go out for it. So is this right? I understand that the Appalachians have the highest salamander diversity in the world.
I have not heard that, but that sounds
beautiful. I've heard that.
At least in the U.S., it sounds right.
Yeah. Yeah. The only other place I guess they got those Bolita glossid salamanders, or whatever they're called, down in Central America or South America. The ones that climb trees and stuff, little arboreal. Yeah. I think those are pretty diverse, but I don't. It seems like I understand the Appalachians are like top for salamander diversity.
Yeah, well, I don't really live in the Appalachians. I actually live
north of there.
I actually don't live in the north. I live to the west of it. I live in the Appalachian Plateau.
Okay, I got you.
Logically, I'm in kind of a neat spot because I'm right on the border between the glaciated and the unglaciated part of the Appalachian Plateau.
which makes a big difference for the fauna and flora.
Yeah, and flora especially. That's just walking around. I just noticed there's a complete difference in the topography of the range. I just go like 2 miles south of my hometown, also in topography and the geology and the fauna and flora just completely changes.
So like I don't know if this is right. Like the Great Lakes those are like glacial puddles, basically.
Pretty big ones, but yeah.
Right? Is that right?
Yeah.
That just blows my mind. It blows my mind.
Crazy.
Yeah, up north we got entire inland seas that are just ice puddles.
Yeah, that's so cool. And like where you live, you know, during the Pleistocene, you were 200 feet under ice where you live.
Pretty much, depending on which glacial phase.
Yeah.
Well, and what's crazy to me, and correct me if I'm wrong, but I was just looking at like recently I was looking at like the temperature of the Earth throughout like all of history, as you know, at least how we see it now, and we're still in like one of the coldest parts of Earth's history, which blew my mind and stuff. I was looking at it and stuff, and we're still like one of the coldest it's ever been and stuff. I don't know, it's crazy.
Yeah, we're still coming off that, you know, I guess off the Pleistocene, the last ice ages, I guess.
Yeah.
You know, but warming from there. I'm not gonna act like I know much about climate stuff. I like trying to learn about the Pleistocene though, because the Pleistocene that like set the stage for a lot of the fun we have now in North America. So like I try to learn about it. Prior to that, you know, get lost.
Speaking of Pleistocene fossils, another funny little story from my hometown. The neighbor from right behind I used to live in town, and the neighbor right behind my house, way back in the day, was digging out a pond, and he stumbled across these big old pachyderm bones. And people for a while he thought it was a mastodon. Then they did the anatomy and they looked at records, and it turns out a circus came through way back in the day, and a couple elephants died, and that's just where they died.
That's funny.
That's hilarious.
That'd be so sad. You think you got a mastodon or a mammoth, and it's a freaking elephant. Circus
elephant.
That would suck.
When I took a spring break trip to Orlando when I was in college, and I found a tapir tooth fossil. We were actually looking for megalodon fossils, but I found a tapir tooth. I thought that was like super cool. I was like, this is super rare. And I looked up, and apparently that's like the most common fossil to find in Florida. It's like it's not rare at all. It's like super common.
I didn't know tapir ranged into Florida ever. That's cool.
Yeah, I didn't know that either. So that's why I thought it was rare.
I'm not surprised that like North America used to have amazing megafauna a long time ago. Like mastodon, mammoth, tapir, like all these like saber-toothed tigers, or they call them something else. You know, big cats of sorts. It was like the Serengeti in Africa, but you know, right here in North America.
A little nippier. Yeah.
You know why? Do you know why all that went away? I mean, obviously.
Yeah, I mean, like there's some people that think, you know, early humans played a role, but then there's other people that think major climatic shifts played a role, right? That's my understanding. I don't know.
Yeah.
I think there's some debate.
But like,
there's always a debate.
Yeah. Well, like, did you say like all the way up to like early European settlement around East Texas, you could still find like jaguar and ocelot all the way up to then, right?
Yeah. That's I really daydream about that stuff.
Have you heard? Sorry, have you heard that apparently there's a coati in Utah in I think a jaguar? I think I heard that, but at least coati.
Arizona. It should be Arizona, right?
Is it Arizona?
Yeah, I think you're thinking of Arizona. There's a jaguar they've been watching coming up across the border. Maybe 2 or 3 of them actually. Or there was a couple, and maybe one got trapped or something. I think one of them actually got hunted or trapped, and it's like, dang, there's so few. How did a hunter even manage to get that thing? You know, it's like a needle in a haystack, intentional or not. You know, that's like crazy. Unfortunate if intentional, but yeah, jaguar. I mean, just to think that jaguar ranged all the way up into East Texas, all the way up to southern Arkansas.
It's crazy.
When Europeans first were arriving, ocelot. same thing, small cat. We still do have ocelot, but you got to go down to South Texas to see them, or you're never going to see one, but
Huh. I didn't know you had
there's a
those
whole,
there.
yeah. So the ocelot, it's kind of one of our flagship species for conservation down in South Texas. A lot of the habitat down there that's being set aside is for ocelot, but it's benefiting all the songbirds that migrate through there, all the neotropical migrants. Which I listened to a podcast with the main guy that studies ocelot. He was the very first person to ever trap the wild ocelot anywhere, but it was in Texas. He doesn't like that these bird people are using ocelot as their flagship conservation species, because a lot of the habitat they're conserving isn't actually ocelot habitat. Ocelots are a habitat specialist. They're only found at least in Texas, only found in really thick Tomaleep thorn scrub. And a lot of these areas they're conserving supposedly for ocelot is really just pretty subpar habitat that birds can use. I don't view this as a bad thing, but this ocelot researchers got some beef with the bird conservationists down there apparently, which just hints at the difficulty and complexity of conservation sometimes.
So do you know why the ocelot is so specialist with their habitat range?
I don't know enough about ocelot ecology. Yeah. They're a small cat, and it seems like they just are perfectly suited to hide among really densely vegetated areas. I guess when jaguar were still around, that's kind of like they filled a niche that allowed them to avoid getting eaten by the jaguar, scurrying about in the thick Tomaleep scrub. I don't know. I'm not really sure, but
it's interesting.
Yeah, and they say there's only about 200 left down there, based off of they've been this ocelot researcher has been trapping them for a couple of decades now. So he has a good handle on their numbers, but only on the ranches he's able to survey. The main one being the East Foundation Ranch. But there's a bunch of other Texas is 98% privately owned. So there are multiple huge ranches like the King Ranch, a lot of people know about. They own like so much of South Texas, and they do have a ton of ocelot habitat. But this is one issue I've learned from that podcast with that ocelot research about the Endangered Species Act is these ranchers, they're scared to let ocelot researchers come on their property, because if they find ocelot, they might, the federal government might come in and, tell them what they can and can't do. So obviously, I am a fan of the Endangered Species Act, but it appears that it is not a perfect system, because it'd be really nice if this ocelot researcher could go and work on private ranches without, and get and study these ocelots and not put the rancher in a position where they might have to sacrifice the way they make their living, their cattle industry.
So somehow create a system that incentivizes finding an ocelot on your ranch or something.
Yeah. Like reward them for conserving ocelot rather than, come in and, try to, tell them what they can and can't do, or, whatever. And the reality is, like King Ranch, as long as they're grazing cattle and making money off their land, selling cattle and doing the deer hunting, the ocelots are always going to be fine there, assuming they are there. But just, they're never going to let researchers come in because they're scared of the Endangered Species Act and what that can lead to. So, I don't know. It's kind of interesting.
So real quick, what's the name of that ocelot podcast?
That was on it was on the Meat Eater podcast. Steve Rinella is Steve Rinella, and he had that ocelot researcher come on to his podcast. It was a really, really interesting conversation they had about ocelot conservation and trying to work with the federal government on not screwing private landowners over when people are trying to learn about these endangered species, that sort of thing.
Apparently, there's capybara running wild in the Everglades now.
That does not surprise me at all. They'll feed the Burmese python so the Burmese don't eat the native fauna.
Yeah, yeah. But yeah, I was just in there and I found this spot that it was really cool because it looks kind of like the Serengeti, you know, but you can kayak straight through it. So like it feels like you're just and the water is only like maybe a foot deep, if that, you know, and you so it's really cool because it feels like you're actually kayaking through just land. It's really neat. It's like
flooded prairie kind of
habitat.
Yeah, so when I come to South Florida, you're gonna come show me around, right?
No, for sure, yeah, dude.
I've been one time actually.
Yeah, where'd
it was
you
a
go?
lot of fun. I went down to Homestead.
Yeah.
I went there for my senior trip. I don't know if you know Chandler Kemenish. Are you familiar? Chandler Kemenish. Chandler's Wildlife.
The guy with the big YouTube channel.
Yeah. So I went down and hung out with him for a week, and he showed me around. We went and snorkeled with alligators, and we looked for Burmese pythons. Didn't find any. Found scarlet snakes, mud snakes. Good time. But I didn't explore as much as I would like to.
Me and Nate and another friend of ours went down for spring break one year, and specifically for Burmese pythons, but just herping in general. And we found a lot of cool different lizards and stuff like that, but we saw one snake the entire week there, the mud snake.
We found two mud snakes, actually.
Mud snakes,
quality over quantity, huh?
Yeah.
Well, I think mud snakes down there are kind of a dime a dozen.
Yeah.
They're pretty common. Here it's hard to find. Common, but they're hard to find where I live. Down there, it seems like they're not as bad.
Homestead's a cool area though, but I live on the other side, so I live in Southwest. But whenever I do go over to the east, I go over to Homestead because Homestead has you can find Burmese pythons there, but that's where the Argentine tegus, that's where the majority of them are in Homestead.
Yep.
A lot of red-headed agamas are over there and stuff. It's kind of like it's mostly farmland over there, so in the Everglades. So it's a neat area. Yeah. But I like South Florida. There's literally all sorts of stuff just all over the place. And
it's a herper's paradise.
I know. If I'm not at work, I'm herping or I'm fishing. I'm doing one of the two. But
fish too, man. They got cool fish.
Yeah.
It would be nice to experience that region before the invasives, and see, because the invasives are like so prolific now. A lot of the native plant animal communities are certainly suffering a little bit, but if you like herps, it's a lot of fun.
You could literally just go out in your backyard and see herps from literally all across the planet.
Did get a chameleon there. I forgot about that. I got a chameleon.
Really? Where, in Homestead?
In Homestead, yeah.
What was it?
It was a veiled.
Veal, okay. See, where I live in Fort Myers, that's where apparently the vast majority of the veiled chameleons are. In most other places is either going to be like an ocelots or a panther chameleon, but I have not found one yet. That one's like the panthers or the chameleons there are like they're like fishermen, once you find a spot, no one will tell you where they're at, and it's really hard to find.
It's kind of weird. It's like an invasive species, and people are I learned recently peacock bass are managed by Florida Fish and Wildlife.
I didn't know
that. It seems like Florida cares more about peacock bass than their native largemouth, because you can only harvest one peacock bass, whereas largemouth you can harvest 5. The limit's 5. I guess they peacock are so valuable for like the fishing recreation and the tourism dollars that come from that they're managing them more intensively than native fish.
Well, that's interesting about the whole management thing is, where's the money go and who produces the money. But I was just showing a friend around last week, and he specifically wanted the peacock bass fish, and so we didn't catch any peacock bass, but there was a lot of I've caught one before, but we didn't catch any this time. There was a lot of cichlids though. Cichlids actually didn't catch any fish the entire week. I hate fishing with them because every single time we go fishing, we never catch anything together. Like if I'm by myself, I catch stuff all the time, but whenever we're together, can't catch a thing. It's super annoying. So
dang, man. Well, better get it together when I come down, because I want to catch a peacock bass.
Well,
yeah, for sure.
Well, it depends when you come down, because in a few months, your old Matthew boy will be on a completely different continent.
Oh yeah,
No, wow.
next June I'll be in Australia getting my master's degree. So.
Oh man, that's awesome.
I know, I'm super excited actually.
When do you start again?
It's like next June.
Next June?
Yeah.
Nice, man. Where at?
July,
And what are you,
next July.
where at? And what are you gonna study?
Yeah, it's at the University of Queensland, which is so it's located in Brisbane, and so it's right at the foot of the Great Barrier Reef.
Wow,
So that's super cool, and it's a master's in conservation biology. So
it's awesome.
specifically, I want to do I want to do reptile research, but I would like to do invasive reptile research, like studying like Burmese pythons and stuff like that down here. I think that'd be super neat. So,
Yeah.
or I might stay over there and do something, see how it goes.
Yeah.
But yeah, I'm actually super excited about it. But you should definitely.
What did you do? Yeah, dude. Australia's been on my mind a lot lately. Used to, I wanted to go there to see all the elapids and monitor lizards and the big salties, but man, there's so much more there too. There's like just herb diversity in general. A lot of cool lizards, the orchids, awesome orchids there. I want to see beautiful landscapes, the mammal diversity. It might be the coolest place in the world for biodiversity. I really think that might be the case. Just like weird stuff out there, especially the mammals.
Oh yeah. That's why I might end up staying there, just because biodiversity is neat. But yeah, I mean, like carpet pythons are apparently a dime a dozen over there. So I'd like
like rat snakes here.
Yeah. Monitor lizards are my favorite by far reptile, and so I'm gonna be in heaven over there.
There's tons of arachnids over there, right?
Oh yeah, for sure.
Different kinds of, yeah. And all the python diversity is cool. Like, there's a lot of cool stuff there aside from the elapids and the crocs.
There's apparently a lot of Australian water dragons, which are super cool looking. I don't know if you've ever seen one of those, but those are neat.
Yeah.
Like the one Aussie herp people will probably be surprised to want to see would be the freshwater crocodiles. I mean,
freshwater crocs, man. Yeah.
Everyone always talks about salties. Like all the Facebook groups I'm on, all the Australians, all they talk about is salties.
Yeah.
And to me, I don't get it. Like you and I, we both know Dieter, and we both know he, compared to other crocodilians, he doesn't really hold salties in that high regard.
Yeah.
So it always kind of amuses me that Aussies go on and on about salties, even though they only make up a fraction of their range in Australia, when they have an endemic species found only there that is so much more extensive throughout their continent than salties are.
And the cool thing about freshies is you can actually get out in the river, and if you find a clear river, you can go snorkel with them and be perfectly safe.
Yeah, and they gallop too.
Yeah, and they gallop. Yeah, I'll never forget seeing that on the Crocodile Hunter. That footage of one taking off on land.
Where did you snorkel with alligators down here in Homestead?
That was a Big Cypress Loop Road.
Oh, really? So you snorkeled in that little stream like that?
Oh yeah, man! So many alligators. It was actually a little eerie at times.
Yeah, that's interesting, because I go down Loop Road all the time because there's so many alligators and snakes. I mean,
what snakes do you find there?
Mostly water snakes, but
a bunch of brown water snakes and stuff.
Yeah, mostly those. I found a couple like scarlet king snakes and other stuff, but mostly water snakes. But I'll go over there like after work, and then wake up early in the morning and bike down the road and stuff. And when you bike, you go slow enough to where you'll see all sorts of stuff that you would have missed if you were like driving. And
if you're in a car,
That's interesting though, because I've never seen the water like enough to snorkel in along that road. So that's really cool that you're able to like snorkel in that.
Yeah. So Chandler, he used to do it all the time, and the water's it's real clear, and you don't go encouraging people to do this. I mean, alligators they're so they're so laid back compared to some of the other crocodilians, but they're still large, dangerous animals. But man, when you get in the water with them, like the whole goal for that trip was to get like footage underwater with an alligator because it was like a childhood bucket list thing. I remember Steve Irwin went out to South Florida. Actually, it may have been somewhere else in Florida, but he went out and he snorkeled with alligators in one episode. And ever since I had seen that when I was a kid, I was like, I got to do this someday. So it was like a childhood bucket list thing to go do that. And it was actually really hard to get footage with an alligator because they were so skittish. It's like they see this large mammal underwater and they're like, what the heck is going on? So it actually took a lot of effort to get close enough to one to actually get the GoPro and actually get a picture of me with an alligator underwater. We finally did get it, but it took a while. Man, it was really neat. It was I want to do that again someday, especially now. I've learned quite a bit about crocodilians since then. I feel like I would appreciate it even more, getting to experience alligators in that underwater environment. So maybe if I go out to South Florida before you leave, we can go do that.
Yeah, that'd be awesome.
Yeah,
That's
you
the
too, Nate.
funny thing about the crocodiles down here is they're either like super skittish, or you could get like as close as you want to them and they won't do anything. Like sometimes I'll be biking, down that road, and they'll be sitting on the side of the road because it's early and the way the sun shines, they're basking and everything. And I could get up right next to them and take a picture or whatever, and they just kind of sit there like whatever. But other than if you get like anywhere close, they'll like immediately bolt. So, but most of the like juveniles and stuff, if you see those, they'll usually immediately turn and run. But last week, I was actually at Lover's Key, and I came across one, and I was kind of slowly coming up to it in my kayak, and it just sat there, and I went like right up next to it, like the boat went right up against its nose and everything. It just kind of sat there, and then I shifted my arm and it bolted, but but it was pretty cool.
That's interesting. Yeah. That reminds me. I've been there's a place called Brazos Bend State Park, which kind of reminds me of some places in Florida where there's just alligators stacked up everywhere. And so I used to go out there all the time. It's really close to crocodile encounter. And when you go out there during the daytime, you'd be walking down a trail and there's alligators all over the place, and they don't move. They don't care. But I've been going down there a couple times this summer helping a buddy with research, and we got there at night. The alligators behave totally different. They're hard to catch. Yeah, it's so strange. They're like, "What are y'all doing out here at night? You're not supposed to be in my swamp right now." Like the first time I went, we did pretty well, but I did have to use my rod and reel a couple times. And cast a small treble hook and snag them and carefully reel them in. It takes a while. We got quite a few, but the most recent time I went, we didn't catch a single alligator. It's like they just like disappeared. They behave totally different at night versus the daytime. But we can't go out there during the daytime because it's a really popular state park, and the research requires some surgical procedures to get fat tissues, and you can't be doing that in the public eye, in the public view. So it's kind of interesting. Those animals, they're clearly aware of when people and abnormal behavior, because they behave differently at night.
Yeah, it's interesting.
Yeah,
that's something. So I'm more of a lizard guy. A lot of our guys have been crocodilian people. So it's been nice to kind of learn, because that's the group I probably know the least about. And something I'm really finding out is how socially just intelligent they are. I guess is just the broad word to use there. Is they're very aware. So it's very interesting.
Who do you got? You got monitors or crocodilians with intelligence?
Well, most of our guests have been saying crocodilians. I'm going to say monitors, though. So
you're going to say monitors. You got to take it from Chris Dieter. Chris Dieter's worked with both for decades, and he goes crocs. He goes crocs.
Yeah. He goes monitors.
I think they have different types of intelligence.
Yeah.
Like we have this human view of intelligence, and it's but like these organisms are so much different, and how they like their version of intelligence is just so much different, and how we interpret that is, probably skewed. To me, crocodilians, they like they're so like methodical, and like they learn the behaviors of their prey, and they're very habitual, and you can like train them to do certain behaviors through you know uh, uh, positive reinforcement with food. And I guess like monitors, I've seen videos of them like using their hands, like reach into holes and like grab food. Like, that's just like a different type. They're just like different types of intelligence, I think.
Something I've been doing a lot of reading on that, and well, just intelligence in general. And one thing I found is that we really don't know like what it is specifically, because like you talk to different people of different scientific disciplines, and they'll tell you like different things. Like I found like psychologists, they'll say that like the IQ test is the true test for like intelligence, and that's that's like the standard and stuff. Whereas like a lot of animal behavioralists will say like it's brain size relative to body size or body weight and stuff, and so you can draw like a line of best fit. You can plot that on a graph and draw a line of best fit, and those above it tend to be more intelligent and stuff. Whereas like geneticists will say it's like, I don't know, I read this really interesting book, but I can't do proper justice to it. But it was really interesting on how like they define how intelligence is interpreted. So
yeah.
So yeah, I think you're right. Different types of intelligence. I think we just don't have like the best proper way to analyze, especially in animals. Let alone humans.
Yeah.
Really properly do it with humans. So
it could just be crocs versus monitors could be problem solving ability versus memory ability. Croc memory, monitors problem solving. I don't know. That just occurred to me.
Yeah, but I guess from my highly limited experience working with both, I've actually probably working with crocs more than monitors, surprisingly enough.
Yeah.
But monitors, from my experience, are like really quick and active and really alert. They'll be really quick to notice something. Whereas crocodilians, they are kind of like laid back, but they're kind of like to sit back and really think something through and kind of
Yeah. Very calculated animals. Yeah.
Well, that's what I was going to say is at the very least, monitors at least appear to be more intelligent just because they're, like you said, they're more active. You see them like figuring and thinking. Whereas like crocodilians, Whereas like crocodilians, they look like they're just kind of like, they're not thinking when they are.
Best comparison I can make is monitors are Tyrion Lannister with a quick comeback, but crocodilians are Tywin Lannister with a delicate plan.
Yeah.
Little Game of Thrones reference. Probably the only one here follows that, but
yeah, honestly, I didn't get any of that, but it was good. It was good.
For those Game of Thrones fans out there, they're going like, yes, exactly, but
yeah.
Something I always thought is that monitors are more like socially intelligent and complex. But talking with a lot of these crocodilian researchers, I'm finding that crocodilians are pretty socially complex themselves, despite it not seeming that way.
Yeah. I would. My intuition would say crocs definitely win as far as social behaviors. Some of the crocs, especially alligators, are very vocal, and they have other cues that they use. But yeah, I honestly don't know much about monitors. But my vibe is that like monitors aren't vocalizing to each other. I'm assuming there's no monitor that vocalizes.
I think there's some that do some vocalizing, but not like in the way, not to like communicate in the way that crocodiles do in any way. So
yeah. You see like crocodilians, a lot of them, they do the bellows, the courtship bellows, and then the juvenile make various noises. And Chinese alligators have the craziest vocalizations. That was one of the coolest things I've got to do was work with Chinese alligators at Crocodile Encounter, and hearing so like every morning during like sort of the breeding season, our American alligators will bellow, and our little male Mushu, he'll bellow back at him. And his bellow is more like a bark. It's like I call it the Chinese alligator bark.
It's like a
Really,
grunt.
it's like a grunt. Yeah, it's like a little grunt. Man, they make strange noises. I can't even. I wish I can like I'm not going to try to reenact them, but like the female, like when the male and the female Mulan and Mushu, are main breeding. I say ours. I don't work there anymore, but I still claim them as mine because I work with them a lot. When Mulan and Mushu would like vocalize to each other, they made some strange noises that I've never heard in American alligators. Really, really interesting animals. Yeah.
When I took my trip out to Orlando, when I found that actually the same day I found the tapir tooth, we saw this alligator just in this little pond, just one alligator. And me and my buddy are running around to the other side of the pond to get a better look at it. And as we pass, there's a smaller puddle off to the side. And as we pass, my friend goes, "Hey, look, man, it's a big lizard." And I look over and it's a little baby alligator sitting there. And I was like, "Oh." So I pick it up and we're kind of taking pictures with it and everything. And it starts to make that chirp noise. And they're like, They're like, why is it doing that with it? And I was like, well, that's probably its mom. They're probably calling its mom because some strangers are picking it up. They're like, should we put this down now? I was like, yeah, probably.
Yeah.
It was all good. It was pretty funny.
One thing, doing shows at Crocodile Encounter or Gator Country, we use baby alligators, and when they call, people get really sad. They're like, "Oh, it's calling for its mom." Like, no, this is an instinct that this animal has. It doesn't at this point, it doesn't know its mom, and the mom doesn't know it. It never actually interacted with its mom. In fact, it's something I've encountered while doing the educational outreach. And people place their emotions on these animals.
Yeah. Well, that's one thing that I found to be tricky is finding that balance between anthropomorphizing while also trying to figure out.
That's what I'm alluding to. Yeah.
Yeah.
That's what I'm alluding to.
So the chirping, do you think that it's just do you think they're actually trying to communicate something with that chirp, or do you think it's just the natural chirp for its mom despite it not knowing its mom, if that makes sense?
I think it's just a behavior that is programmed into them. When they're stressed, they chirp. That's just it.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. I remember working at Crocodile Encounter. We make that little that noise. Yeah, that one there. And it would always make all the American alligators turn on a dime and zoom in on us.
Oh yeah.
And like they heard a youngster in distress, but as soon as they get around a Chinese alligator, they straight up attack the fence. They hate it.
Yeah. Mulan, the female, not the male, only the female would attack the fence. The last time I was at Crocodile Encounter was not last weekend, but the weekend before. I was looking at, so we have another male now, and they're all together. And I was looking in there. I was like, who is that? And someone said, "That's Milan." I was like, "That's not Milan." So I go, and she came and attacked the fence. I was like, "All right, that's Milan." That's how I know it's her. She hates that noise.
To tie back to the whole monitor crocodilian debate, one thing I do know is crocodilians are the only extant reptile with a highly developed cerebral cortex, whereas
that's significant.
Whereas monitors don't really have that so much. And I mean, just the whole anatomy of crocodilians is really weird. They're probably have the craziest anatomy and physiology of any tetrapod alive today, in my opinion.
Yeah, that another point for crocodilians there. Cerebral cortex.
Yeah. They're the oldest, extant reptile. I mean, they've been around for forever, so it's like,
even like the modern.
Do what?
Like modern crocs in their current form have looked this way for a very long time, is my understanding.
Yeah, which is great. Which one is crazy, but two, I mean, it just kind of shows you how impressively they're built. So.
And this is the perfect they feel this perfect niche where they mastered it. I guess some crocs were terrestrial, some were fully aquatic. The ones that lived on were the ones that did both kind of. They hunt at the land water interface. They still can run on land a little bit, but they retreat to the water and sort of semi-aquatic. And those are the ones that it'd be cool if we still had terrestrial crocs. That would be pretty cool. But they didn't survive those. They didn't survive the mass extinction. So there's something to be said about the.
I think there were actually some post-KT extinction terrestrial crocodilians, like in South America and Australia, actually, and actually in Europe.
Wait, say that again.
Just from what I've done some researching and reading on it, just because I'm a nerd and find that interesting. But
I
know that there are some actual apex predator, fully terrestrial crocodilians after the KT extinction, like in Europe.
Oh wow, that's cool.
In North America, South America, unsurprisingly enough, and of course in Australia.
That's awesome.
And like all in like 3 different families, I believe, as well.
Oh man, that's really badass.
Yeah.
You have to send me some of that stuff.
Yeah, I think the northern hemisphere one was like, I think called Bovorsuchus, if I recall correctly.
Yeah.
And the South American family was Sebecidae, and the Australasian family was the Mechosuchinae. So.
Gotcha. I
Unfortunately,
wonder why it is that we don't have terrestrial.
No, go ahead.
I wonder why it is. You're kind of lagging a little bit. Am I lagging?
You're not lagging on my end, but I can hear us lagging on your end.
Yeah.
Okay. Nate, you're good. But yeah, I was just like, man, I wonder why we don't have terrestrial crocs anymore.
I don't know.
Climate change and mammalian competition is my best guess.
It's got to be climate related. Yeah. Got Cuban crocs. They're close enough.
Yeah.
You look at their legs, man. Those things can run on land, man.
Yeah. I know. And Smooth Front came in, so the Schneiders,
and Osteolaemus too.
Yeah, it's like the smaller crocodilian, the more better they are suited to be on land. So
yeah,
like
I'll never forget. Go ahead.
Like Trichinotis actually has like a slightly siphodonic teeth, actually, instead of the typical peg crocodilian teeth. There's actually a slightly compressed. They actually have the proportionally shortest tail for any crocodilian. So it actually helps them balance on their pelvic girdle a little bit better.
You can almost start to view them more as a semi-terrestrial species.
Yeah. Because they just live out on these little tiny poles in the middle of the rainforest. And most times now walking around on land at night, like climbing up in bushes and stuff like that.
So I remember seeing a picture of it was I think it was Matt Shirley, whoever runs a project Mesostops thing in West Africa. He was studying Mesostops and Osteolaemus. I think it was Matt Shirley, whatever his name is. Anyway, he posted on his Instagram a picture of an Osteolaemus foraging around a village far from water, eating insects. Or maybe it was a video. I was like, man, that is a terrestrial croc right there. And just like they film just like the same role as a Paleosuchus. Really neat.
Something I found interesting. There's this video series of that just does like biopaleontology and stuff like that, and they were talking about something people a lot of talk about is like, could Titanoboa and some of these like larger reptiles still exist and stuff like that. And one thing that the video series is talking about is they existed because of that thermal maximum in the Earth's history when the Earth was like super hot. And because it was super hot, it allowed them to grow so big. And then now that it's not so hot, there's a limit to the size so big. So I found that super interesting because that was always something I was like, oh, well, I doubt they're still alive, but I don't see why they couldn't be. But, when you hear something like that, no, they couldn't.
There were like in Earth's history when it was really warm like that. There are also huge plants, like ferns the size of redwoods and shit, or maybe not that big, but like tree ferns were like prevalent at different times in Earth's history when it was much warmer.
Yeah, interesting. And freaking giant sloths and all sorts
Giant
of stuff.
sloths, yeah. Yes, North
There is
America had a ground sloth, big ground sloth.
Yeah, apparently I just watched actually a video series of the same paleobiology thing that was talking about sloths and how they used to be. Well, how they used to be big, but also how they went from like being on land to like being like there's a subspecies of them that was like almost exclusively in water and
Oh
stuff, and
wow.
they'd like hold on, use their claws to hold on to like kelp and eat the kelp, and then so I don't remember. It was all having to do with how the climate changed and everything like that. That they went from one to another and then ended up just in the trees, and they've stayed there ever since. So
Is this PBS Eons you're talking about?
yeah, yeah, yeah.
Yeah, I'm following that. It's a good channel.
It is. Yeah, I enjoy it.
I just want to point out, like when we talk about like paleo stuff, man, our experience of the world is just such a small, tiny little glimpse, and like I feel like there's so much we don't know. It's kind of humbling, but it's also like frustrating. I wish we like could travel back in time and see a ground sloth.
That'd be
Yeah.
so cool.
I'd
I'd want to see Titanoboa. Just could you imagine coming face to face with a snake that huge? It's insane.
Yeah. I actually don't. I don't know much or anything about. I don't think I've ever heard of that species.
Oh yeah, it's I first came across it as a kid in a documentary, and it showed like
Yeah.
the vertebra of one, and it was like the size of like an elephant vertebra. I was like, "There's no way that came from a snake." It's insane. Yeah, it was huge, but yeah, they I don't remember the exact size, but
They have good fossils of those.
yeah, there's vertebra fossil mostly that I
Yeah.
know of.
No head, no skulls.
I think they actually found a bit of skull material, a little bit.
Really?
Maybe, yeah.
I think it's
Yeah.
like kind of anaconda-ish, but
Yeah. That's cool.
unsurprising.
What continent were they found on?
Northern South America. Northern
Yeah.
South America.
Got to be a boid of some sort.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's what they basically said. There was some sort of boa. So but it's
But
insane.
Speaking of like Northern South America, that place actually, I think it's what, like Miocene. Northern South America actually had the highest recorded diversity of crocodilians at like 13 different species.
Jesus.
In the same exact region, and all the same region, like all the different overlapping ecosystems in that region. They're like there's gharials, there's crocodiles, there's caimans.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
It's crazy.
It's a damn shame that there's not such a place now where you can go see 13 species of crocodilians.
Well, got a St. Augustine Alligator Park, I guess.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. What is if you were going to go to one place, country or continent to see the most crocodilian diversity, I guess you got to go to South America, huh, for caiman?
Probably like Venezuela or Colombia, because then you can get like American and Orinoco in there as well.
And you get and then you get the caiman, 3 or 4 species of caiman there, right?
Yeah.
I guess Southeast Asia, get I don't know, Saltese, New Guinea, Siamese. I don't know.
I think like Central Africa, you might get like a West African, Nile, and one of whatever species or subspecies of dwarf.
Yeah. It's got to be South America's it's got to be the place to go though if you want a maximum number of species of crocs.
Yeah.
I know. Man, it'd be cool to see an Orinoco in the wild, wouldn't it?
Oh yeah, the Orinoco's, they have a crocodile encounter, just such an amazing species. I never saw them before in my life before I went there, and I saw them the first day, and I instantly just fell in love with them the first moment I saw them.
I almost got tore up by an Orinoco twice.
Yeah, I don't know.
We had the 2 Coco and Loco, and it started to get to the point where Dallas World Aquarium was sending us all their big adults because they didn't have room. And I think it was either Rosalita or Andrea who was named after me. When they first came down, they were in a box. They weren't taped up, but they had to get pit tags in them just as an identifying mark. And so they had me get on. It was me, it was Chris, Luis. They had me sort of get on this animal right outside the box and just to get the tag in really fast and release it. Didn't work out very well. The animal freaked out. Teeth are flying all over the place. They're so strong. Like these are 6-foot animals, and you would think I could just sit on them like a 6-foot alligator, no problem at all. Untaped, you sit on them, put a pit tag in. Orinoco's, they're slippery. They're strong. I have a lot of respect for them. I almost got tore, and Luis saved me. Luis came in and hey, do you know Luis Siegler?
No, I do not.
Have you heard the name? He's the one that has been breeding Orinoco's at Dallas World Aquarium. He is the man for Orinoco's, and he's kind of like the liaison for connecting with those guys in Venezuela to release captive bred head started Orinoco's back into the Orinoco Basin. So he's the Orinoco man. Him and Alvaro, whatever his last, Alvaro is a guy from Venezuela. Them two, they work together.
Is he the guy that Alvaro's named after?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Alvaro's such a cool rock.
Right, big dude. He's massive. If you've seen him, did you see him this year?
When I was down there, I was walking around and all I saw was his head sticking out of the water.
Man, when he comes out of the water, he's put on a lot of mass. I'll say that he's put on a lot of weight.
Chunky.
He's a big dude. He's chunky. He's still getting after it. His head is massive. I can't believe how big his head is. We got to move him inside here soon. That's gonna be exciting. Getting him back indoors for the winter.
Yeah, I gotta send you a picture I took of him when he was indoors of just his head, and I am kind of proud of that shot. To be fair, I mean, I don't know how it compares to your professional photography, but I gotta show you a picture of that.
Man, when you got an animal that impressive, it doesn't matter what camera you have, to be honest.
Just my cell phone.
Yeah, even a cell phone.
Disposable camera.
Yeah.
There's limits.
That was man, we got 12 Orinoco's now at Crocodile. A couple juveniles came in recently. I think there's 12 or 13 now.
Yeah, I just transported
all the adults
back in October.
Yeah. So I thought I heard some more came, smaller ones.
Yeah, and I transported Salty down there once as well, the 6-foot.
Yeah, I remember that. That's the last time. Last time we heard was for that, when you came for that, huh?
Yeah.
Remember that croc is doing well. Apparently it's growing a lot.
Yeah, I've seen it. Dieter told me about it. It's growing 2 feet in length and adding maybe 100, 200 pounds in a year.
That's just this subtropical environment we get down here makes a big difference versus
difference between 8th grade and 9th grade, I guess.
Right. Yeah, it'd be cool when those salties get big. Yeah.
Well, Matt, you got any other questions?
No, I don't think so. This has been fun though.
Yeah, man, I have enjoyed the heck out of this.
Yeah, it's been fun.
This is the way. Just having a fun conversation and record it. That's the way to go.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, and you'll definitely have to come down here in Florida and check out everything that's down here.
Yeah, man. Yeah, and then when you go to Australia, I'll be hitting you up.
Yeah, definitely for sure.
Me and that other guy we went to Florida with are already tentatively planning on stopping by when he graduates down there. So
yeah, man.
Maybe we get you an extra plane ticket.
Heck yeah.
All right.
The plane tickets are cheaper than I was expecting, but the flight time's insane. It's anywhere between 24 and 26 hours. It's insane.
Jesus.
I can't imagine being on a plane where you couldn't lay down flat or you know what I'm saying? It's for 24 hours.
That freaks me out a little bit. The longest flight I've had was 2 hours, and I was getting a little antsy.
Longest I've been on was to Utah, and that was 3.5 hours long, and as long as I watched 2 movies and I was fine. But I forgot my earbuds actually. And so I was like, I don't know how I'm going to be able to sit there with nothing to do for 3 hours, but I ended up getting little crappy ones. So.
Yeah.
All right. Well, thanks for coming on the show.
Man, I had a great time. Thanks for having me on, Nate.
Yeah, a lot of fun. Thanks for
nice to meet you, Matt.
Nice to meet you.
Till next time, guys.
Yep, sounds good.